Dave's one of our Fair Credit Reporting Act experts in our office, so I wanted to pose this question to him is, what information can stay on my credit report? It's a huge question, and a lot of people have it. So give us a synopsis of that, if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, any current and loan that you have going on right now is reporting, and you obviously want it reporting on your credit because it's showing that you're paying. But it's the bad debt that people want off their credit because it's gonna pull your score down. It's gonna make financing new loans that much more difficult. The standard time frames, are 7 years for bad debt, but there are exceptions to that 7 years. Meaning, what I mean by bad debt is when you go delinquent on the debt. From the time you go delinquent, it can report negatively on your credit for 7 years. The exceptions, have a wide range. You can categorize them to a certain extent, but the big one is bankruptcy. It does report for a longer period of time. It's 10 years from the date that you do file bankruptcy.
Well, let me interrupt you there. Now, there's different types of bankruptcies. There's Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Does it make a difference?
No, it's 10 years for either one. It's based upon the date that you file, or in certain cases another time that for an involuntary bankruptcy where someone sues you into bankruptcy. But it's 10 years from the date you file, and whether it's a Chapter 13 that completes 5 years later or a Chapter 7 that completes about 3 to 4 months after you file, it's still based upon when you filed. So it's 10 years from the date the case initially started.
And that brings up another question for me. Let's say I file a Chapter 7. And it's going to report. Let's say I filed Chapter 7 yesterday, December 1st, 2010. Mm-hmm. Now, I know right there that it's going to be on my credit report for 10 years.
Correct.
So it's going to stay on there till December 1st, 2020. Can I rebuild my credit in that time frame? Can I start to rebuild my credit?
Absolutely. I mean, the good thing about a bankruptcy is if you have all these debts, they're reporting negatively, they're doing two things. One, your score is based on a couple different factors, which I won't go into how FICO does all that, but one of the factors is the ability to pay. In a bankruptcy, yes, it's going to be a negative mark on your credit, no doubt, but so is the delinquencies and non-payments that you do beforehand. So a lot of times people come and see me, their credit is already tanked, and the bankruptcy, what it's going to do, it's going to zero out that liability. So what that does for the future is when someone looks at your score, yes, they see the negative report, but they also see that you don't owe debt, which means you now have income showing to them when you're applying for this credit. They see an ability to pay that debt because you don't have other debts to pay. So they know you're not going to use their credit to pay other people's debts and rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. So you do look better when you start applying because you have more.
For the debt-to-income ratio, yeah, the debt-to-income ratio dramatically changes after bankruptcy, and it allows you to start rebuilding your credit. That's one of the big questions we have in our practice. People come in and say, what's going to happen to my credit report? How fast can I rebuild? And how fast can I buy a home again? And that all comes down to the individual. And let's say, for example, you file the Chapter 7. It's going to be on your credit report for 10 years. But let's say after the Chapter 7's over, you're still making a mortgage payment, or you're making a car payment, or you're on 2 cars. You're making 2 car payments. Well, your credit report's going to start rebuilding faster that way because you're showing the ability to pay, like David's referring to.